My nan, my biological father's mother, taught me when I was quite young. In your case, I want you to consider dismissal of the Bible altogether. This in particular was after the conflict between my parents. She was very respectful of whether at the time we wished to reconcile with him then or not. He visited on one or two occasions, and we'd just be outside having cigarettes. We were sitting down thinking of what to say. Now, so what I want to talk about goes on in the mind. It's like abduction and being conned into some really fucked up behavior is, at least upholding some very fucked up principles if they're never acted on, is what it means to be. So it's hard to know what to make of cherry pickers or moderates, because we know that what they're doing is picking the verses out of the Bible that they find suits their agenda best, and of the nicest of them, they're doing it so that there's compatibility between their nominal religious texts and the Human Rights Act. Now, however, yeah, religious freedom shouldn't. Does religious freedom have to be a human right so long as there isn't a single church teaching humanism anywhere? They're all teaching you how you're not human, how you're really an alien, how you're really this, that, and the other. So, in my father's case, what I hate is that there's this relinquish all liabilities to the TV and video, and say that his anxiety during this conflict. My father was a person who turned and he insisted on his own arrest. He extended his arms out in a cuff-ready position towards police officers, and he said, "I deserve to be shot. Arrest me now," and he insisted on his own arrest. And how I've understood it to be is that there is an injunction in the book of Deuteronomy where it says that when two men are talking and the wife of the one draw near, is to help defend. The verse is a mockery of a woman's ability to defend a male in a fight, but so as to defend her man by taking his opponent by the secrets, then shalt thou cut off her hand. Now this was the verse that was. So when you're a bastard, when you don't have paternity, when you don't have a blood father, then to have you don't have and then to get told the religious typical but you have a heavenly Father who's more immense and more powerful than any human's actual father. Like, it's so much more bigger than reality. It's holy, and they just need to be told a bunch of shit like that for a while, and then anxiety. The price that's paid in anxiety for just trying to measure up to this God's approval metric for approval is if he doesn't like the way that my mother would compose herself in the company of other men, he was absolutely authorized to cut her hand off. And then after that, he goes to stab her in the face. So, what they don't want coming out is that the Bible and Christianity are direct indictments to crime, motivations to crime. My mother is scarcely that was the thing about what made my parents the odd couple, was she had religion imposed on her by both her parents, my grandparents, and my father conversely had it imposed on him in the sense of if you're to prove yourself worthy of the love of our daughter, then you must do so by being Christian. So he had to go through and discover the hard way for himself what that anguish is if you have never had a father figure, to be thrown into a situation where on book you've got the same injunctions on one page saying love your neighbor, and then on the next page you've got it saying if a woman doesn't cry out loudly enough when being raped, she deserves to be stoned to death as an accessory to her own defilement. Or women must remain silent in church. If a woman has an opinion, a question, she can ask her husband at home, for it's disgraceful that a woman should appear in a church. What goes on in the event of bastardized males is that there's an additional appeal to the allure that a Heavenly Father exists. There's also a complete absence of any father figure whatsoever. So what happens as a result of that is that there's psychological allurement to this prospect that this Heavenly Father exists, and then the question becomes, well, then how do I please him? And this accounts for his basic collection of knives and all the weapons that my father would keep and collect. And so on the night in 1989, during the attack between my parents, obviously scarred and changed my life forever, but and it meant planning a sort of a recovery situation between my mother and my sister and I. And where I did waver was that I'd noticed sibling rivalry, and I would get involved in a little bit of sibling rivalry with my sister. This audio cassette that was stolen from Downer, that however was made purely as an artwork. I produced the tape, but we're both pissed off enough about it being stolen. No contact there was no contact made during the entire creation of the cassette. So, this is why I was writing about puberty the other day in my draft existentialist works, is that I really remember what it was like to have that prepubescent cartoonish depiction of sex. And if you've ever looked at pornographic material prior to going into puberty, you'll know what it is meant by it. You'll know there's something of a head buzz for just looking at the material. Cat on Red Dwarf explains it really well. He goes, in one episode of Red Dwarf, he goes, I got this feeling like there's something I'm gonna want to be doing. And whatever it is, I want to do a lot of it. And he's trying to describe an account for an attraction to a female for the first time. And so, the platonic nature of a sibling relationship, you can even learn to extend out of courtesy to step relatives, just because you know how formalized the dynamic is because you're step families. So it can go though it need not by logical necessity. Um, but I get where and how this comes from, this mentality, and I talked about, well, puberty is a phenomenon where you go through, your body undergoes certain chemical changes. There's not really a sensation of an awkward or like the awkward touch in a way. There's I mean, it depends. Unless you are a true predator's target, and no, in terms of just getting along, you can view adult sexuality and laugh at it as if it's kind of cartoonish, and you can't relate to it. You physically can't relate to it. And then there's an odd aspect to puberty where, paradoxically, after passing through puberty, you're able to look back on the images of various women you found attractive before puberty, and there's a sensation as if they always were really attractive to you. And that can remain, but that's an illusion too. In Threats of Romance, Manson sings, she and every she will always be your idea of her. And that's getting existential there, and making a point of it. It's not to say a woman is misogynistically defined by a male's expectations. It's to say that a male is also limited to only have an idea of a woman to contend with. And so that calls into question, how emotionally mature are you going to be? How attentive are you going to be? How much attention are you going to pay to a woman's needs, etc., and etc., and etc. But why I'm offended by Don't Trust and I'm against psychiatry is that all these cases that they'll try to make, like, did you get involved in fist fights with a sibling before puberty, or when you were young? They'll specify on when you were a child. And if you say yes, then they might try and say, well, we suspect you're not succeeding in your love life because there was some sexual embarrassing aspect to those fights. It's like, well, yeah, well, you taught me that in high school, you fucker. Who supplied the psychology textbooks free to the school? And then so in a way there's certain wisdom to going, this information is to be temporarily learnt for the purposes of passing an assignment, but once it is, as to whether or not it's personally believed in or trusted, rather than an example of how a particular industry conducts business, order of business, well, that's an entirely different matter altogether. But yeah, I'm disgraced by it, getting robbed, and then these people that rob me want to justify robbing me, so they go through all this content and they think they can frame issues around them, and go, well, let's say this of Luke. It'll take him years to make the recovery and stand up for himself. Because he's confided in Capital Chemist that Christianity played a significant role in his family's breaking up. So let's tell all of Canberra that he's Christian. Let's tell the press that he's Christian. So it was the closest thing to a direct assassination attempt that I've ever known. So yeah, this I just don't accept, and I've put up the guy on TV nowadays who is the guy to go and shoot three women in Sydney, um, and then he just says while while locked up with the police and being interrogated, he says, "I killed, but I did not murder because I was obeying a command of God." And these were all three women that had broke up with and left him. So why he would even have an interest to pursue and rekindle anything would have to have been by way of recourse to a literary command of God that entailed the ownership of women. And there are plenty of examples of those in the Bible, but what we need to do is make sure that I submit that there should be a religious a separate act altogether. See what it does for mental health and insurance scams is if there's the Human Rights Act, the Mental Health Act, and the Religious Act. And the Religious Act, or the Religious/Philosophy Act, be an altogether separate act than the Human Rights Act. Because that's the one thing that all religions have in common, is that they, none of them are teaching humanism. Not a single one of them. They're teaching you how you're a space alien temporarily occupying human form. They're telling you how you will reincarnate and come back as a member of a different species. They're telling you how you're an immortal soul that's either going to heaven or hell. They're telling you a whole ensemble of ideas about yourself, all of which flow in direct contradiction to the known facts of human biology and human anatomy and physics, the laws of physics as well. And yet they want to say that these theologies are nonetheless binding of the facts of what it means to truly be human. What place do these? We know we can go to whatever company for 10-pin bowling that we like. We can play it on Nintendo Wii at home. We can go to AMF. We don't, and it wouldn't. We would know this even if there weren't even if there were more proselytizers. Oh no, weren't any proselytizers going around saying, "Oh, come to AMF 10-pin bowling. It's fucking awesome. It's real hot." And like sending around chicks in bikinis to advertise for AMF. We would still understand that as adult humans, we've got the right to choose which bowling alley we want to go to and go to it. It does not need to have its reserved place on the Human Rights Charter. And particularly since nothing's been taught about human rights, but rather supernaturalism or superhuman rights, or superhuman identity, that you've got to sit back and wonder: is it not an all-round general act of hypocrisy that that the Religious Freedoms Act is stated as a basic human rights act? It's been getting mocked in the census polls for years and years. People are writing Jedi, I'm a Jedi. Part of what's meant by that is quit trying to use the Force on me to state a religious view when I don't have one. You know, this category is a muck. You know, instead you get Gary Cairns and Roger Toll, the two homoerotically angry religious unifiers, get together and go, well, let's show these two what it means to try and say their religion is science fiction video. Oh, we'll make them sick, all right. Sicker than they've ever known. My father was a man invested in a wide literary collection of everything from Stephen King horror books to Tolkien. Um, he was a big fan of fictional film, Stephen King films, and Stephen King books and horror. And what it is that if you ask my mum for the version of events, she'll say things like, he was drunk, where, she's claiming that she's this violence victim who's to be respected as a violent survivor, but she's always pointing to, oh, can you pray to that murdered man on the wall, on the cross? Can you celebrate his killing and be thankful for it? So be so thankful for it that you'll eat his body, because that's how important of a message your mother would like to send you about being anti-violence. I don't understand why she would go through what she went through, have the complaints that she's had, and yet be so endorsing of Christianity throughout the years, which she absolutely has been. Now, she's also the one, and her side of the family are the ones to react to TV, no matter what's on, as if it were a reality check. Even if the rating is like, this is a fictional movie, contains strong, coarse language. I'm a person who could probably sue the ratings PG, PGR, and M for saying that there needs to be actually M I wouldn't have a go at, but PG and PGR, parental guidance and parental guidance recommended. I'm like, this has got to be due to the corrupting effects of advertisements in mainstream TV shows. Every single ad for every product, service, locale to visit, trade, or whatever is the ad will mention an award for how it's the best in the business according to, the Slut Whore Award for being really picky about which business wins the Slut Whore Award of 2020, and I only really liked in the last year. I've only liked that ad that showed a couch falling down from an airplane and crashing on the ground, and they're talking about how durable the couch is until you see it smash upon impact on the ground, and they go, unless you drop it from an atmospheric high plane, airplane, and so yeah, what it is that my grandfather's always had these depressive complaints about what's on the news today. Why is it all so negative? I've expanded. Like I have a more. I'm not mopey about the news. I'm just not trusting of it. There can be serious legal conundrums, and the news is not going to show you adequate court coverage of those matters being resolved for privacy reasons. And so that makes the freedom of the press activists amongst the staff become bitter. If they worship the God of the Bible, then they have elevated jealousy as a godly trait. We know humans that have gotten over jealousy. Why is it that we have to worship or look up to a being who gets jealous when jealousy is something that we humans are able to outgrow? And are able to outgrow all without any help from a God, or even the belief in a God himself whatsoever. So So what I'm not going to let happen is, because of deprived paternity and sabotage paternity early on in life, before ages, like how curious to watch these businesses go. Well, we want to target a 5-year-old child's brain at whatever developmental stage it's at, and just target it with pumped full of antipsychotics. Right, well, you're going to be a sex offender the next time you try that, because there are certain side effects for which you as an agency bear responsibility for. And it's rather simple. These agencies could avoid complications if they were to advertise their side effects. If they were to advertise their side effects, essentially what they've done is go and try to say, like, yeah, cigarette packets show the rotten foot, show the dead baby on the aspirator, show the lung, the rotten lung. But are these all? Was that baby left to medical science by a mother's will? What about all those who suffer side effects from antipsychotics? Can we put the photographs of those patients' dead bodies onto packets of prescription drugs? Anytime there's been a death from a prescription drug, well, obviously the Pharmacy Guild in Canberra here has a very comprehensive insurance policy. A pharmacist can be insured for up to $1 million in the event that he kills a patient. He or she kills a patient. So this is what this goes on, and this is the reality of that which goes on. And keeping people informed about what the wrong side effects, negative side effects are or can be. What I think they're trying to do is gamble the placebo effect that it may work in their favor. It's already shown in the way that they've tried to make a sort of more artistically looking psych ward, is that they try. Guards would even approach me going, "Oh, it's 5-star." And I was like, "No, this is not 5-star. There's still, there's still the stereotype about people being nuts if they use crayons in a psych facility." And though I notice you've stepped back to Faber-Castell pencils, the stereotype retains nonetheless. So, what I won't tolerate is what little though I only knew my father for a handful of years, what I did know about him was that he could handle his fiction, and what I do know about my mother is that to this day she can't. And that's not a result of her in 1989. That's a result of how she was raised to contend with the television. Too much TV rots your brain. Okay, that doesn't get into why, you've got more reasons to be distrustful of the mainstream media than you do have reasons to be trustful of it, because they're out as a private agency to do what they can to get a good story at all costs, playing, in a sense, judge, jury, executioner, issue framer, and just hoping that there's more people they can rot with such a grandstanding position, because they think any citizen's going to feel completely obliged to have to respond to a camera, irrespective of their consent, in regards to the matter being filmed at a given point in time. And that is the law. Sorry, I thought I was actually going to fart then, sorry. When Big Pharma, in conjunction with the AFP, have put out these profiles, it's never a result of any voluntary profiling efforts that you've made in cooperation with them. It's stuff they're saying about you that's alleged. So you obviously want that heard in a court, and the names of the officers to state this profile and type it up to be made answerable. Because if they truly think that they can take the glimmer from a star in the night sky into cash converters and get paid back for the its value as jewelry, they've got quite a retarded idea at profiling. And so it's made implicit to you by when your family stops inviting you to certain events, when you start to lose regular contact with certain people, and you start to notice when or when your former boss, says direct things to you that are directly threatening, like your father shortly before he's found dead, or and you know, things like this. So what they did do, because they're pharmacists and they're interested in the gross net profit of antipsychotics. They've got a smiley cover over how and why it doesn't have to be bought from a capital chemist store. It can simply be administered. And that's because that serves the guild's interest anyway, because Roger Tall and Gary Cairns have investments in the wholesaler. So it won't matter if you get your antipsychotics done at Capital Chemist or if you get them done at a mental health clinic elsewhere. They'll still get their share because they're shareholders in the wholesaler. Now, so it's twisted and fucked up the way that they try to ruin families. And as far as the media goes, another reason why it's worthwhile to detest them is that the amount of people, if one side of the family's outnumbered another side and there's now no witnesses living on one side, particular side of the family, then arguably they'll say, well, your testimony has no, there's no one to back it up, but it's your actual history. It's your imperfect, in need of a dust off, rotten history, but it's still your history, and it's still how you've grown and the circumstances you've grown up through. So, yeah. I don't appreciate the media doing that and going, well, let's make a profile and say that video. It's a tremendous amount of stress for me to have worked in pharmacy for 9 years when pharmacy wasn't a career path that was commensurate with my best grades in school. It was somewhere I was getting constantly requested to work throughout Year 12. Year 12 were noticing, and the school was paying for me to do a 3D animation study course of at night time at the Bruce CIT campus, so that the Capital Chemist store would be closed and I could get more study in along the topics to which I took interest and got reasonable grades in, which were always art, music, and journalism. So that I didn't get to go and work in an area that was commensurate with my grades. I got to go and work at Capital Chemist. And the lesson here. I also don't think them profiling their own biphobia is going to help them either solve a case or suck their own dicks. even with that faithfully removed rib of theirs to help them get the extra upper torsonic spin as they take the plunge, to boldly go where probably only old men have gone before, since they're into, finding the scrawniest person on a pension for physically disabling pain, and then arresting them for walking home with a packet of Panadine Fort, locking them in a watch house and giving them no medication in order to compromise them before a judge's hearing, so that a mental health review is decided to be wise by the presiding judge. That I found to be a truly disgusting way to get treated by the courts, and I'm over that. What I've learned is, once enemies, always enemies. The police split up my family. What's the difference between being fostered and being neglected, but your mother takes credit for your upbringing? Well, the result is that you're represented to have been parented, and certain expectations are placed on you, like it's expected that you'll be just as adaptive to any suited work conditions on the menu. Whereas, however, you're compromised because there's too many weak points and vulnerabilities, that unless you're working in an area for which you are especially passionate, you are going to be at risk of various nervous breakdowns, mental breakdowns, depression, and the like. So, I'm I'm happy when the truth can be made known, and I'm not happy with the journalists who I like are Louis Theroux and Lois Lane. There aren't a great and certain Rolling Stones regulars. Rolling Stone. And Kerrang do some good interviews too. But anyway, it's I will speak in defense of my father. I didn't get to go to his funeral. I didn't get to say goodbye to him when his remains were found. So I'll stick up for what I know, and what I know I got from him, because I didn't get it from Mum or anyone on Mum's side of the family, is that you don't have to watch fictionalized footage while thinking that all of this is like it's as true as the notice about the Great Depression margin loans recall. You have 24 hours to repay all the assets you borrowed from the banks. The margin loan is being recalled, alert, alert. I mean, that's how they treat movies like Ghost with Patrick Swayze, and oh really? So Patrick Swayze just levitated out of his body on a street then? What if, do you think it was his his ghost? What if his ghost watched TV? Would it rot his brain now that he himself is a ghost? Do you think it'll rot his brain? So, my father understood the difference between fiction and fact. What it is that deliberately works to blur the difference between fiction, fact, and Human Rights Act is religion. It has done so all throughout the past, and it will continue to do so until there is an assertive stance against it on the basis of the damage that religion does to society at large. And that will do. Thank you.